we're going to begin with a little meditation to begin with, try to set motivation. Because as we've mentioned so many times, most important factor in creating virtuous karma, or non-virtuous karma, is the motivation that you set before the action. Also important is the motivation that you keep going during the action, but kind of what sets the whole tenor, the whole flavor of the karma, that it is the motivation beforehand. So let's try to sit comfortably. Relax your body, relax your mind. And first of all, just place your attention on the breathing as usual. Focus on that, recognizing an inhalation as opposed to an exhalation and so forth, the endpoints, and let go of all other thoughts. Then draw your attention further inside to your heart chakra, if you can, to imagine just watching the nature of your mind, which you can begin to identify by noticing the thoughts, which are contents of the mind, and recognizing that they are appearing, moving within a matrix, a substratum, which is the consciousness itself. So letting go again and again of any images or thoughts, that are arising within that clear light nature, just try to focus on that spacious, non-obstructing, clear light nature of the mind. Whatever arises to your mind, whether it be the appearance of your body, seemingly irrefutable, or your ego, seemingly so definitely there, let go of them, recognizing them as objects apprehended within the clarity of your mind, and focus instead on the nature of the mind within which they were appearing. Recognize that you have at this time a human rebirth of leisure and opportunity, what the Buddha called leisure from the 8 unfree states, where there's no chance to practice the Dharma, an opportunity or endowment, richness within the freedom of these unfree states. 5 factors from your own side, 5 factors from the outside. Such a rebirth is incredibly powerful to be able to practice the Dharma, because we have the not only are we free from adverse conditions, we have all the necessary conditions to practice. We don't need other things. Such an opportunity is of incredible importance and value, more valuable than a wish-granting jewel or gem. A whole universe of wish-granting gems couldn't provide what this life of leisure and endowment can provide. The opportunity to purify negative karma, to ensure that we're not born in the lower realms in future lives. Opportunity to create virtue. A perfect opportunity to develop realizations along the path, to leave a very strong instinct of renunciation, conventional bodhicitta based on compassion, wisdom that realizes emptiness. These realizations can't be cultivated in their entirety in the lower realms as they can with this life. Nor could a wish-granting gem or Aladdin's lamp grant us what this life can provide in that respect. Whatever happens in our life, whatever tragedies, companionship that we lose, or esteem or wealth. That is nothing compared to what we do have yet. We have the ability to practice the Dharma, transform whatever adverse condition occurs into the path. But this situation is rare because the causes of it are rare. Pure morality, other perfections, especially generosity, that give us the various conditions that we need. And prayer, stainless prayer, as the bodhisattvas can cause the various karmic elements, seeds in their mind stream to ripen together in a rebirth like this, we might call perfect human rebirth. These conditions are very, very difficult to create. It's not sufficient to just practice a worldly, moral life, ethical behavior, but something very powerful that can throw us into the upper realms. To know how to do it is difficult. To actually do it is even more difficult. To purify, to know how to purify when we've fallen from that ethical behavior, also difficult to know and difficult to actualize. The Buddha said that a life like this is as rare as a blind turtle, lives on the bottom of the ocean. It comes up once every century, once every 100 years, for a gulp of air, for 1 second. As rare as that tortoise being able to stick its neck through a golden yolk floating on the surface of the ocean that migrates all the time. Just coming up once every 100 years is very rare, but to find all of the conditions to practice the Dharma, like this golden yolk, golden ring, incredibly rare. Having found this, we should recognize that it's not permanent. Not only is it difficult to attain, very rare, but we're definitely going to have to leave it behind. We definitely have to die. All historical beings that we know of were born in the world, lived, died. Powerful beings, much more powerful than ourselves, with great merit, also aged, died. We too, our friends, our companions, our family, if not sooner, definitely later, will die. There's no way that we can avoid this. No place to go, no medicines to take, no special exercise routines or diets that can prevent us from dying. With every second, we're getting closer to that death. Our perfect human rebirth, this opportunity to practice Dharma, is constantly eroding, like falling through time. Although we're oblivious of it usually, wasting our time on meaningless activities of this life. Falling through time. Definitely, we have to reach the end of this lifespan. And when we do, there is no extension of time. Besides that, we spend most of our time not practicing the Dharma. Most of our life passes from childhood up till now. Perhaps we haven't encountered the Dharma at all until recently. A good portion of our life was spent that way. even now, in sleep, in play, in generating the materials for food, collecting them, going shopping and so forth, preparing it, savoring it, cleaning up, washing ourselves, entertaining ourselves and friends. How much time do we actually have for the practice of Dharma? This life will definitely pass. Unless we practice the Dharma, it will definitely pass unused. So I must, as a consequence, practice the Dharma. That's the great value of this human rebirth that we have. The time that I have left is uncertain, so I can't put off the practice of Dharma. I don't know when I'm going to die with any certainty. Even if I'm young, I may die before those that are older than I am now. After all, we're human beings in a continent that has no fixed lifespan. People die at every age, with plans, with expectations, just as we have now, thinking, oh, I'll grow older, I'll have this, I'll have a family, I'll do this or that. No assurance those plans will be completed. This life that we have, its longevity, its period, its duration is uncertain also because most of the things that we think of as causes of life can become causes of our demise, our death. We can choke on the water we think we need to drink. The food that we need to eat can raise our cholesterol, give us a heart attack. We can choke on it, the bones. Thinking the various friends and companions that we have to meet are causes of our life. Erroneously, we can die in a car accident going to see them, or in a car accident going to work for our livelihood. Time of death is uncertain also because the body is very fragile. Even a new car, very heavy metal, in the course of a couple of years, just a few years, can get scratched up, dented, even if we're very careful. What about our body, which is much more fragile? A little imbalance of the elements, the contamination of some virus or bacteria, a mosquito bite, cut from a plant where bacteria can enter is enough. Throw our system out of balance. Hitting a wall, falling, slipping. Many different ways that this fragile body can pass away. And when we do reach that end of this lifetime, which is inevitable, we're not certain when, could be today, this year, nothing that we usually hold as important, our body, our friends, our wealth, reputation, none of those things can help us. They actually hinder us and harm us at that time. They can't be taken with us. Not one friend, not $1, not one security that we've saved. Our reputation also has to be left behind. We go as a different person. This body that we spend so much time taken care of, so that others will care for us, so that we'll have pleasure of the senses. At the time of death, it becomes our enemy. It fails us at that time. It can't support us or help us. The only thing that helps at the time of death is the Dharma and two senses, that which we've practiced this lifetime, the accumulation of merit that we can take with us like a negotiable commodity we can take on the train that goes between stations of lives. And also our peace of mind that allows us to die in a peaceful Dharma state of mind, so that we're not causing heavy negative karmic seeds to be activated at the time of death. So we can die with a Dharma mind. These two thoughts together, incredible value of this life, more valuable than a universe of wish-granting gems, of billion-dollar bank accounts. It is definitely only obtained for a short instant. Definitely has to be left behind. And its value, the practice Dharma, is the only thing that can help us at the time of death. Thinking like that, try to motivate for the class tonight. Think, I'm going to pay attention with a fresh, childlike mind, even if I've heard the material before, to listen to it, to try to understand the words, contemplate it, evaluate it in my mind, and when I come to some understanding of the words, even during the discourse, try to meditate to whatever degree I can, familiarize my mind with those states that are arising. Both for my own benefit and for the welfare of all living beings who still now, like limitless space, are numberless, all of whom have been my intimate friends, my mother in numberless lifetimes, and have been depthlessly kind through beginningless time. For their welfare to become less harmful, to become beneficial, to lead them by pacifying my mind completely out of confusion into real, everlasting, blissful happiness. I'm going to participate in the class tonight. Question, think, answer, hopefully, for their benefit. In order to become enlightened, reach my highest potential for the welfare of all living beings. And then relax. Bring your attention back, present. How's everyone? Anyone have any questions from what the last two lectures we had, trying to prepare ourselves for the continuing lectures of Children Rinpoche, starting tomorrow? Rinpoche will be starting about refuge. So we've been talking about the the first few meditations on the stages of the path, the Lam Rim, the recognizing the life of leisure and endowment. Do you know what the Tibetan is for that, by any chance? Do you know? What is it? Deljor, our scholar, Tibetan Pemo. Delwa means leisure or relaxation. Jorwa means, it's a lot of different meanings, but one of the meanings is to have endowment. To be endowed with something, to have opportunity and so forth. So these two aspects. Venerable Enji, do you know the Tibetan word for impermanence? You know? Come on. You do. What is it? No. Something similar. That's disintegration, right? Mitakpa. Many times, if you talk to the Tibetan Lamas, did you ever hear Kuri Sanjab Rinpoche mention? Mitakpa. Just when something happens and you get upset, you say, mitakpa. Means impermanent. Mi is a negative particle. Takpa means permanent. So things are not permanent. They're mitakpa, not permanent, impermanent. And of course, if we understood emptiness, that would also be a great salve for our mind, an ointment for our mind when we were upset, to calm the disturbed mind. Now, in the Lam Rim, remember the teachings on following the guru, spiritual guide, had a particular reason, because they were explained because properly relying on a spiritual guide is the root of the path. And then, having relied on a guide, there were, how one follows the path. The first thing that was talked about there was trying to encourage the mind or interest the mind in taking advantage of this life. And that was the meditation on what? Come on. The human rebirth of leisure and endowment. Sometimes it's called precious human rebirth, but that's not literally what's in Tibetan. It's just sort of a Western translation of the meaning of that. And once the mind has been encouraged to do that, then the actual gist of the text is introduced, talking about the individuals of these three scopes. What are the three scopes? Cinema scope. What are the three? What are the? Panavision. That's not a scope. No. Small scope, middling scope, great scope, or the person of small capacity, middling capacity, and great capacity, in the sense of their orientation. The great being, the middling being, and the small being. The small being doesn't mean small of stature, means a person who spiritually is at least aiming beyond the aims of this lifetime. If your whole orientation is just to be successful this life, almost impossible that you are creating any virtuous karma. Maybe you create virtue by the power of the objects that you might encounter, Buddhas or something like that. Indirectly, you might create some virtue, but not very much virtue at all, let alone strong virtue to, strong morality, ethical behavior to create the cause to be born as a human again in the future. The individual of the lowest capacity is an individual who starts to be suspect of the attractions of this life, fearful of what may come after this lifetime, sufferings that could occur, and begins to restrain oneself from negativity, abstaining from engaging in the 10 paths of negative action. What do we call it? Sometimes they call it the 10 non-virtuous actions. It's actually called the paths of non-virtue. And creating virtue, actually trying to create virtue for that aim. So I think many religious systems, probably the main practice falls into that category. So Christianity and other religions. And there's a lot of our Buddhist practice. The individual of intermediate scope is a person who thinks, even if I'm born as a human again, or as a god, or whatever, that also is impermanent. That also is mitakpa. I'd have to die. And evaluating it sees that it's a never-ending cycle while you're in cyclic existence. Hearing the teachings, knowing from the Buddha's teachings and through one's own experience how to get out of samsara, cyclic existence. They practice the 3 higher trainings. What are the 3 higher trainings? Yeah? It's not baseball, football. That's lower trainings, right? What are the higher trainings? What you find in the Olympics? Higher morality, yeah. Is that good? Georgia, good. Yeah. Concentration and wisdom, higher training. Why? And they're called higher trainings. Why? Why aren't they just called trainings? There is a training in morality. What's the difference between training in morality and higher training in morality? Do you remember? If it's conjoined with a sense of wanting to get out of cyclic existence, if that's the reason you're observing ethical behavior, then conjoined with that understanding, that motivation of renunciation, that's called a higher training of ethics or morality, and so forth, and higher training of concentration. Simply to develop concentration and have psychic powers. So, like Milarepa, you could send. What was it? What did he want to send? Plague, or what was it? Storms. What do you call it? Hailstorms on his in-laws and other people's, his landlord's land, destroy them and send scorpions and things. That's not called a higher training and concentration, even though you might have incredible concentration. Okay. So, where do we go from there? So, having understood the life of leisure and endowment, having been incited to take advantage of that, the actual method to do that, the person of beginning scope first recognizes the definite nature of mortality, of our death, and the fact that the time of death is uncertain. The only thing that helps at the time of death is the Dharma. Not just that. The whole understanding is one of trying to eventually understand subtle impermanence. That's like incredibly powerful wisdom that overcomes what kind of misconception, wrong view? Do you know, Lisa? What kind of?
Phenomenon?
Understanding impermanence overcomes the wrong view of the self. Is that right? Indirectly, not really. It overcomes the wrong view that compounded things, that the things that we encounter are permanent. We don't necessarily think that. We don't think that we're going to live forever. But we somehow subtly, because we look in the mirror every day, we look more or less the same. Especially you look more or less the same if you put a little of that hair stuff on so you don't notice the color. Most of you up here, you're willing to, let your real color go. But a lot of times you put color on so you don't see, you and others don't see that you're getting older, right? I'm just teasing. Okay. I don't think anyone here would do that, would they? I'm not sure. Okay. So that of the 4 wrong views that the Buddha talked about, do you remember? Last time we talked about the 4 wrong views. Do you remember, Luis? These 4 views that are so pernicious to our practice. Who remembers? Don remembers.
Impermanent is permanent.
Grasping to things that are actually impermanent, leading them as permanent, viewing them that way.
Things that are suffering is pleasurable.
Which, like what? Well, I don't think that.
Accomplishments, worldly.
Come on, ice cream, that's really happy. That's real happiness, isn't it? Or Beethoven, Mozart, Van Gogh. That's real pleasure. No, exactly. Those are the things. Maybe as people who are intellectual might think there are some things that are intellectual not just the things, meat and potatoes or football or something like that. I think the things that are real pleasure, the sunset or the birds or something. Even that, from Buddhist perspective, that we get some mental satisfaction from, it's not real pleasure. Real pleasure would be something that if you were to be in contact with this, with that longer, you should feel more and more satisfied. The more you looked at the sunset, the more you heard the ego-pleasing words, the more you were in contact with the chocolate. You could have a little piece of chocolate sort of on your tongue, you know, or a tube coming down from, or on your shoulder, so that it was always dripping on your tongue. You'd be constantly happy. But of course, after some time, you wouldn't experience it as pleasure any longer. Even medication, even, what do people give? Morphine drips, they call them? Something like that? Is that the one they give? What if you're unlucky? Drano. If you're lucky. I hope you're that lucky. And then thirdly, what? Other misconception. Grasping impermanent as permanent. Grasping that which is actually suffering as...
Selfless is self. It's having self.
That which is actually selfless and empty. Grasping it as having some kind of self-identity, real, findable identity. And?
Pure as impure.
Grasping things that are things that are actually impure as pure. Is that very applicable? Does that only refer to, like, you know, when you go to the market and you thought it was pure margarine and it actually had something else in it? What was it referring to? Don? Yeah?
Morality, motivation, or intention.
Anyone know? Venerable, do you know? Pardon?
The body.
The aggregates. Those impure aggregates. Why are they impure? They're impure because they're contaminated. Well, if they're contaminated, they're suffering. So the impure... I'm not sure. I don't think that's exactly the meaning, although you could, you know, there's some relationship. I think here was talking about, because the antidote to this wrong view is to analyze the nature of things as having parts. Like we see something, we see someone we find very attractive. We see them as, which our mind kind of thinks, just good. We don't look at the bad side of it. If you were to open that up with the scalpel of your mind and see the parts, and over time, maybe the various mental states that one might have to encounter in being with that person, let's say, you would recognize that would be an antidote to viewing them as pure. Another way, I'm not sure, pure, sort of, it's not exactly the word attractive, but kind of like that. You know, that we think of things as having a natural beauty. That'd be beautiful, you could say, for purity like this also. It doesn't, the word is not exactly pure, that we usually translate as pure. So, yeah.
It's referring then to the objects we desire and seeing them as going to be satisfactory. And
thinking of things like, say, our own body as something of beauty and purity, not recognizing that, you know, after a couple of hours without a shower, we start to perspire and our breath starts to smell, and, you know, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche has said all the time, there's, you know, the Tibetans use this word for excrement, kaka. It's sort of like kid talk, right? Universal kid talk. You have to go kaka. So he says there's, when you wake up in the morning, there's eye kaka, you know, there's ear kaka. When Thupten Pemo has to blow her nose, there's nose kaka. There's that stuff on your teeth, sort of mouth kaka. What's that stuff called? Plaque. You have to, if you don't brush your teeth, sort of you can scrape it off with your finger. So these different kinds of, these wrong views are sort of the factors that befuddle us and cause our other delusions to be energized. All of our anger, our attachment jealousy, pride, and of course our closed-minded ignorance and so forth. Main one, as a beginner, the main thing that prevents us from entering the path and practicing is grasping the thing, that which, everything that we encounter for the most part is impermanent. What do we encounter that's not impermanent? National debt. What is that? That's permanence. No, that's also impermanent. Do you have an idea? Anything that we encounter in everyday life? Death. Death is not permanent. Death is, we say, inevitable. Anything in life is permanent. You know, your stash of coffee that goes down, the sugar, your money goes down, your lifespan decreases. Yeah, usually we say almost everything. That's why sometimes people say everything is impermanent, where it's not really everything is impermanent, but almost everything that we encounter within cyclic existence. Only some intellectual constructs that we can understand, like space, or the cessations that are developed on the path, the ending of the delusions are permanent. Things like that, and emptiness and so forth, other things like that. Space, non-obstructing contact, permanent. So in that same, whatever.
So I have a question. It might be off the topic, but as far
But it
as
just happened to come right now, right?
yeah,
Okay. I'll give it a try.
and you don't have to answer it if it's not appropriate. But the thing about viewing that which is impure as being pure,
Yes.
and with that, and also the idea of that the Lam Rim shows that there is no contradiction between Sutra and Tantra. How do we reconcile that view with practicing pure view in the Vajrayana?
Whoa. That's a big...
You don't have to answer that.
I don't have to answer that. When we try to have pure view in Tantra, it's not the same as this impure view, because this impure view is viewing things which are, by their nature, the result of karma, contaminated karma, delusion, and so forth, and counteracting the way that they appear to our ordinary mind is that some things are beautiful, other things are repulsive. Pure view is one in which, like the Buddhas have pure view, but they don't necessarily see what we see. They have pure view in the sense that whatever they encounter is viewed and experienced in the same taste of bliss. Right now, if I offered you a big bowl of, I don't know what, Rocky Road. Do you like Rocky Road? That sounds good. Or a big bowl of, what do you not like? What did you not like when you're... Kaka, of course, but, okay, kaka, okay. Rocky Road or kaka. There'd be no choice. No argument, right? In your mind. You want the kaka, right? You want the Rocky Road. So pure view, and also friends and enemies, we have a view, a partiality. Those that we think that are kind to us, that are some resource for us, that benefit us, we are kind to, and we, if we have something, we'll share it with them, but not with the others. I could make a political statement here, but I'm going to try to restrain myself. It's going to come out. It's going to come out anyway. Okay, I have to. Okay. Just like in politics, there's certain mindsets that would. I won't mention any parties. There's some that would actually think it's better to take care and to that which is your own. And we do in the world. We think that that's a very wise decision. Take care of your family first. Take care of your neighborhood. Take care of your country. And to heck with the others. So pure view is one in which one transcends the ordinary appearances, because the ordinary appearances that are arising because of karma and delusion, you have no choice. They appear that way, and they are experienced by your senses, by your mind, your apprehension, according to your karma, as pleasant or unpleasant, pleasant or unpleasant. There's a dichotomy. Whereas pure view, you try to superimpose mentally the apprehension that you've generated out of emptiness within the identity of yourself as a deity, the resultant state of yourself being Buddha. And everything experienced, all of the other suffering people, the toll operators, the people who call you on the phone at 4 a.m. and ask if you want to subscribe to their telephone or whatever, everyone as dakas and dakinis and so forth. So you're superimposing that from your side with reason, as is explained in Tantra, because things don't have this natural kind of impure appearance. So that's completely different. That's something that you train to do in order to overcome impure view that does perceive things as pure and impure in the world, worldly purity, but it's not real purity. Attractive beauty. Okay, does that help? Okay. So now the sequence of events comes this way. Next, contemplating what will occur in your future life. So the previous outline, then when we talked about mindfulness of death, the outline at this point was the actual way to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. It was the meditation on the life of leisure and endowment was inciting one, encouraging one to take advantage of it. Now the actual way to take full advantage has different outlines. Training the mind in the stages of the path shared with a person of small capacity. Then later shared with a person of medium capacity, and then training the mind in the stages of the path shared with a person, or exclusive to the person of great capacity. So here, the training in the path shared with a person of small capacity, the first outline is the actual training of thought, training of the mind for a person of small capacity. And first outline there, developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives. Right? The first outline there is mindfulness of death. So developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives. Mindfulness of death is the first, and then the second is contemplating that which will occur in your future life, the happiness and suffering of the two types of beings. What are the two types of beings? Do you know Tibetan? Pamela? Venerable? Good. Oh, we've perplexed our Lam Rim meditator here. Means after this life, there's only two kinds of beings. Beings that are experiencing suffering, lower realms, and those that are experiencing pleasure. So contemplating that, after this lifetime, we don't know. We can't be assured that we're going to be born in the upper realms, even though we might think, we're human, we're always going to be born better and better, and so forth and so on. Contemplating the suffering of the lower realms, essentially. And then, when we get to where Rinpoche is going to begin, the second outline, besides, after developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives, it has these two sub-outlines, one of which we've done, mindfulness of death, and now reflecting on the future life. And then the second part of the outline of the person of small scope, relying on the means to achieve happiness in the next lifetime. And one of the outlines there is training and going for refuge, and then they'll be talking about karma and so forth. So this it's very useful to see how the outlines are divided up. So reflecting on your future lives, so you think this way. I think Lama Tsongkhapa's prose here, very, 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 very logical. So if you just think like this, he says, this is based on what we've just done, right? Since it is certain that you will die soon, as previously mentioned. Almost sounds a bit pessimistic, huh? Is that pessimistic, that you'll die soon? Realistic. You don't know, yeah. Realistically speaking, we're not going to live for eons. We don't know how long we're going to live, but it could be very soon. You cannot remain in this life. Think about that. You can't remain in this life, from what we've just understood about death. As you do not cease to exist after death, you will be reborn. Okay, so here, this is something that is kind of taken for granted in many Asian countries, at least in the past. It was part of their culture that we did not cease at death. But maybe, do we have to mention something about that? Why don't we cease at death? What do you think, Eric? Why do we die? The body burn up. Uncle Charlie's gone. Or Uncle Kong, or whatever your uncle's name is. Why? How do you know that? Well, something that we don't know with certainty. It's something that we have to develop some understanding of, because it's not part of our culture, probably, in the West. I mean, some people, maybe their parents were kind of New Age. Any of your parents kind of New Age parents, and they told you definitely there's life after death? One of your parents was? Which, your mom or your dad? Your mom? It's more pragmatic. Huh? How about you, Tenzin? Parents ever mention? Oh, I thought you were going to say that. My parents told me I was going to hell. Or that they wished I would go to hell or something like that. They said you were going to heaven. That's very sweet. That's very sweet. You're Catholic, right? You were raised Catholic. That's nice. That's nice. How about you? Your parents?
My dad thought absolutely not. There's not a past. A future. Yeah, or past. And my mom's one of those who's like open. She's like just open to the possibility. And my questioning mind goes, well, how do we know? I mean,
exactly.
How do you know? Okay. I mean, you guys. I'm sort of here, sort of opening up to Buddhism for the first time lately, and so it's like I hear it so matter of factly.
Right. So it's not a matter. It shouldn't be a matter of fact. It's something that we have to investigate. It may be presented, in this case, is kind of presented in the Tibetan context as a matter of fact because it was part of the culture. Or Chinese. In Chinese culture, was it kind of considered, or were your parents more materialistic, 20th century, 21st century?
It's almost implicit.
Oh, it was implicit that there's something,
yeah,
life that continues after this. Whereas in our society, Judeo-Christian peoples of the book tradition, there might be, for people who are religious, they believe that there is something, the soul continues after this life, right? So and that depends upon what you do this lifetime. So there's something in that respect. But from a Buddhist perspective, there is no eternal kind of soul. There is a kind of unending mind stream that we have right now that we can begin to recognize, not just through the teachings of Buddha. Eventually we can actually recognize in our own meditation its nature as being kind of insubstantial, not comprised of particles, not atomic, not energetic in the same way that other things are comprised of particles or can be transformed into energy. It's related with matter, the mind. It's related with the energy currents in our body, but it's not identical to the energy currents or the movement of chemical changes along the nerve synapses and so forth. It's the mind, the mental experience itself is something that is sometimes likened to a rider on a horse. And the energy currents within our body that often science is able to measure to some degree, maybe the grosser versions, are like the vehicle of the mind, the mount of the mind, consciousness. So the Buddha explained, and it was to an audience in India some 2,500 years ago that already had a general acceptance of this, that at the time of death, our gross mind ceased, just as our gross mind absorbs at the time of sleep, isn't it? You know, falling asleep, and even you open up your sister's eye or your brother's eye, and they're not there, right? It doesn't seem. I mean, you might be able to shake them up, or if they were fooling you, they might jump on you or something. But the mind absorbs at that time. But there is a continuity because they wake up the next morning and they know who they are. There was a remembrance of what happened yesterday. So there is something that continues throughout the night, even when the gross mind absorbs. That's called the subtle mind. And at the time of death, when the gross mind completely absorbs, never to emerge again in the same form that it did this lifetime, with all the personality elements and the memories of this lifetime, that subtlemost mind continues after this lifetime, leaves this body, and continues according to our karma, according to the actions that we've created, virtuous or non-virtuous, in the past. We're thrown by the winds of karma.
That sounds a whole lot like a soul to me.
Sounds a whole lot like a soul, doesn't it?
It sounds pretty.
I'm not so sure you're going to heaven. I hope you're going to heaven. I don't mean to argue with your parents, but the whole thesis here is that if we were going to heaven, without much, pardon? Guys in dresses. Isn't that some TV show like that's San Francisco, isn't it? Yeah. Isn't that Castro Street? I don't know.
Sounds the same. Soul, mind. What's the difference?
Okay. When we look at it, it might seem to be very similar. But when we think of the soul, we're thinking of something that we have a sense of in our mind. We have an intuition of. In some theological explanations in Christianity, it's said that it's ineffable, but it's that you can't really touch it, but it seems so clear that it's there. Almost this sense of soul is what Buddhism calls the Atma, or the sense of self that you can't really place your finger on, but dominates you. It seems to be there, constantly there, some central unifying character of your being that continues on all the time. When we study the Buddhist understanding of wisdom, the Buddha said that this is the fundamental problem that we have, believing in this kind of soul that has a real identity, almost findable, existing from its own side. That there is a self, there is a Tenzin, there is a sky, there is a, I don't mean up in the sky, I mean the fellow over there named Sky. There is a being that exists, but in a much different way than our mind conceives. The Tenzin that exists is not the soul of Tenzin that he conceives of, or that we might conceive of, but Tenzin is merely a concept we attribute to that particular collection of parts that continues. Now you might say, well, that's cutting, what is it, cutting hairs? Splitting hairs? Or that's just, what's the other word they're using nowadays? That's just semantics they're using in the debates. Oh, that's just semantics. There's a very big difference how our mind perceives it. The subtlemost mind and subtlemost wind that continues from life to life is not the soul. It's not, it itself is merely imputed. It doesn't have a findable existence, even though we might think of it as being findable in the end. It itself has a certain consequence and a continuity that arises because of causes and conditions. But the being that's continued from life to life is merely imputed upon that collection of parts, just as the gross person in this lifetime, Tenzin, that we recognize, is imputed upon the gross parts of this lifetime. With that to chew on, why don't we take a little break? Okay, anyone have any questions they wanted to pursue before we would continue? Basically, we're going to just go a little bit about this recognizing, contemplating on the suffering of the hell realms and so forth. So contemplating what will occur in your future life, the happiness or suffering of the two types of beings. So the two types of beings are beings of the lower realms, beings of the higher upper realms. So you might, from a further point along in the Lam Rim, you might say, well, all of cyclic existence is of the nature of suffering. But there's something more intense about the suffering of the lower realms, because there's very little, for the most part, very little experience of pleasurable feeling in the lower realms. Very intense suffering feeling. Of course, even pleasurable feeling is the nature of suffering. We talk about it other times. But also, what about animals? Not all animals suffer. There's some animals who live cuddled and have best food, probably better food than we have sometimes. So that's not really a lower realm. They don't fall into the category of the lower realms. Well, some of the different sufferings there, they're the suffering of being obscured, the mind not having the same acuity as our minds to recognize the Dharma and so forth. But generally, when we talk about the suffering of the two types of beings, recognizing that, whatever you think this lifetime, you can't really be assured that you're going to be born in the upper realms as a human or a god in the next lifetime. So knowing that, you have to be prepared. You have to contemplate, you have to recognize, get familiar with what the suffering is that's the alternative after this lifetime. And they're the three realms, the suffering of the hells. Do you know what the Sanskrit word is? Yeah. Was it in Hindi, Was it? The Naraka. So the hell beings is something that's sometimes in Catholic school or whatever, it was something that you might have been suspect of. Did you suspect the nuns told you about the hells? They were the hell beings. Do you think, did you ever have the feeling they just made all of this up? You went to Catholic school or anything? Did you think they made it up just so you'd, or it was like it was a big conspiracy, or?
I never bought into any of it, and when they got to the Immaculate Conception, I was
You were New Age, you didn't believe that, huh? So many religions talk about the kind of suffering of a being that we don't perceive. Generally, the hell realms is not something that you can perceive with your senses, although there are some, like we were talking, I think last time, there's something called the occasional hells that can occur part of the time as a human body. But in general, the hell experience is something that's beyond our ken. Maybe the spirit realm of the hungry ghosts is something we have some interaction with, but generally people might be completely dubious of that. They might think spirits are just superstitious, right? Superstition. And the animals are the realm that we have the most. I mean, no one's going to deny that animals exist, right? But these are experiences. You're not going to deny that, are you? Okay. I thought you were going to say, I'm going to deny that animals, they're just as obscure as hell beings or hungry ghosts. Where do animals exist? Only in the human realm? Do they exist? Are there animals in the Preta realm? In the hell realm? In the God realm? Okay, we have a little bit. There are no animals in the God realm? Where are they in the animal realm, in the God realm? Parakeets, or what are they? famous example is, I can't remember the Tibetan or the Sanskrit name, the elephants in the God realm and the anti-God realm. The Indra has a Reptin, like Geshe Reptin's name. Reptin, part of the name of the elephant. That is the mount of Indra, I think. So there are animals that inhabit the God realm, but they're not God beings, just as there are animals that inhabit and have interaction with humans, and they're not humans. Okay. So why do we mention this? Is it just informational, or is it like kind of psychological warfare to try to scare you to practice Dharma or something? Well, no. One of the causes of the beginning, the real entry into the practice of Buddhism, what constitutes a Buddhist is an individual who takes refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha from the depth of their heart. And one of the causes of that is fear, intelligent fear, not a debilitating fear. We might think generally, as a supposedly rational person, that any system that has any impetus that's based on fear would be not something that's suitable. It should only be based on intellect and reason. But if we let's say preoccupation or concern, if you know that after this lifetime one might be born in these situations where there was no freedom to practice the Dharma, not only that, not having a life of leisure and endowment, but incredible, unbearable suffering, one could be concerned about that. Even now, people who are told that they have cancer or they have some other kind of disease, they can have a great fear of the future suffering, even though it might not be manifesting right now. And out of that, they can actually seek the antidotes to that. They can seek some kind of solution to prevent that. They can take if there is some kind of treatment available, right? So this is kind of like the motivating factor, one of the motivating factors to recognize this suffering. So the Buddha talked about there existing, we could say, 3 kinds of hells: the hot hells, the cold hells, and the occasional hells. Occasional hells are not sort of temperate. You shouldn't think because they're hot and cold, and the occasional hells are kind of in between or something. How many hot hells are there that the Buddha talked about? They're probably numberless, but do you know, Tuantama? 8. 8. And how many cold hells are there? Yeah. I was just easy question because same answer both times. It doesn't mean that there are only 8 kinds of hell experiences, but there are maybe 8 kind of gradations of experience of the hot hells. What do you think? Or from your reading, did some of you read ahead? Did you read ahead? Are the hell realms merely a projection of the mind? Are they due to individual karma, or are they due to collective karma? Do many people experience a hell realm together? Collective? What do you think, Pamela? In between bites? She's not answering because she's chewing.
The stories you read other hell beings, and you're also.
Are they just a projection of your mind, or are there actually other sentient beings that are experiencing the hell with you?
I think I've heard it explained both ways.
Yeah. I think you find in the Abhidharma Kosha, like from the Vaibhashika point of view, it sounds like it's due to collective karma. In the upper Abhidharma, supposedly the Abhidhamma Samuccaya that's Asanga composed, it seems like maybe it's due to individual karma, but that's mainly from the Chittamatra point of view. I think my feeling is, from the Prasangika point of view, again, like many other things, it accords very much with the Vaibhashika, that it is something that's collective karma, that there are these hells that come about, and individuals that are, you have your own particular experience in it. You may be somewhat isolated, but sometimes you fight with other beings. Say, for instance, in the first of the hot hells, the reviving hell, you actually, not only are weapons falling from the sky, but you may actually fight with other beings that are there. So, who knows, Dave, have you studied any of this before? Do you know the names of the hot hells? Or the experiences of them?
No, I know that there's a very hot hell and a very, very hot hell.
Okay, that's good.
I think right here on this earth, I mean, are people experiencing them like here on the planet?
In general, these hells, so we talked about the hot hells and the cold hells, are not experienced on Earth. There's some kind of experiences on Earth that might be somewhat symbolic of that, or sort of suggestive of that, like being burned alive in the ovens of Auschwitz, or frozen to death in the Himalayas, or something like that. In the but those, they pale in comparison to the experience of the hells, because the hell being doesn't have a physical body like this. They have a body which is due to the person's karma, is such that even if it dies within that, seemingly dies because, or faints because of pain, it is revived again and again. And even the least of the hell realms last millions and millions of human years. So what we experience on Earth is, as a human being, although it might seem hellish, is in no way a hell experience, although it's suggestive of that. And it can give you an idea, if this kind of thing can happen while still having a human body, what's it going to be like when I don't have this particular kind of constraint? Yeah, okay, you don't have to buy it. You can take it on installment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having trouble that like anybody's karma would be that bad that they would like go through something that
Well,
would
here,
be like
a good
even
example
worse
also is,
on this planet.
even in this lifetime, we might think, how could there be people who could experience such suffering, to be burned alive, or to be tortured, or to be pulled apart?
Really bad, but if you're talking about like worse than that.
Yeah, okay, so only up to a point you can accept, but beyond that,
Yeah, it didn't
okay,
get too much worse
okay,
than that.
you can't get too much worse. That's just your own, your own thought. I'm not saying that you can't have opinion, but there's no evidence. You're just saying it doesn't seem like that. It's not right that there should be any suffering more than that. Doesn't seem like there could be. The Buddha said that there was suffering more than this, and it's not that you have to buy what the Buddha said. You just have to swallow what he said and just, this is the way it is. It's not as though the Buddha is punishing us, or the bodhisattvas or someone is deciding. It is a natural result of our actions, in the same way that fire is hot. You might be angry that fire is hot, or that ice is cold, but in knowing that, you can avoid any danger of them if you're skillful. The hell realms are called, let's see, we could use general names, say the reviving hell, the black line hell, what's it called? Next one, hot hell? Or the howling hell? What comes next? Oh, crushing hell, howling, wailing, or extremely howling. So we've got reviving hell, black line hell, crushing hell, then two howling and extremely howling. Then what? The hot hell, and extremely hot, and the hell of unceasing torment, called the Sanskrit name, the Avicii hell. So those are the 8 hells. So the reviving hell is one that, if we can imagine this way, you, after dying from either animal or spirit or another hell rebirth, or as a human, if you're going to be born in this hell realm, you awaken upon an incredibly hot, almost like molten copper landscape, fires in all direction. Perhaps other beings that you perceive are not, depending on your own particular experience of that hell. Just like in Earth, you might be born in an isolated place or in a metropolis, so to speak. And weapons begin to descend, or you begin to fight with others with weapons, and you are impaled again and again with weapons. If you can imagine this in meditation, just imagine your sensitive body now. The hell body is even more sensitive. If a knife were to fall, or sword or something, or what's another thing, a spear in the ceiling, through your shoulder, or through your chest, through your tummy, through your thigh, incredible pain and fear, surprise, and irritate, very, very great suffering, very, very uncomfortable. Then another. Even you try to move around, they're just falling down in striking you and constantly feeling more and more suffering. Then cutting off your ears, hitting your head, in coming into what you think of as your brain or your being or whatever. Incredible suffering, fear that you're going to die, because this is something that even the hell being has. Feeling more and more pain, even the blood falling out of your body onto the hot ground, experienced as suffering, until you faint because of the incredible pain and the shock, only to arise again the next instant, again with another fresh body, again to experience a similar kind of thing, other weapons falling down. Kind of like a nightmare. Right? Do you ever have a nightmare like that? Luckily not. This is said to be the least suffering of the hot hells, and an individual that's born into that, the lifespan is compared with the lifespan of the desire realm gods. So to be born in the first of the desire realm god realms, one day in that god realm is essentially 50 human years. Remember the story of a Sangha going up to Tushita Pure Realm? And how long did he stay up there? How long did he receive teachings from a Sangha? Short time, wasn't it? A day or two. Came down to earth, and 50 or 100 years had passed. So many times in the in the tankas of a Sangha, he looks very, 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 very old or young. What would he look? I'm not sure what they're trying to represent, but either he looks very young or very old to represent that he's been up in Tushita. I guess everyone else got old, and he still looked young compared to them. So in the God realm, the first of the God realms, one day is equivalent to 50 human years. And if you count 30 of those days in a month and 12 of those months in a year, they live what? How many of their Deva lives, how many Deva years do they live in the first God realm? What, 500 years or something, right? So that's very, very long. If just one of their days is 50 human years, they live 500 years, Deva years. So the Deva realm, incredibly that's just the first of the Deva realms, and they keep on increasing in their lifespan as you go up. The first of the hell realms is such that that lifespan in let's read from the text on page 163, 164. You're saying, okay. Which one? 163? No, I'm talking about the time. Bottom of 164. Thus you must experience these sufferings until the force of your karma is exhausted. In reference to this, it is said that 50 human years is a single day for the deities of the heaven of the four great kings. This is the lowest of there's 6 kinds of gods of the desire realm. 30 of these are a month, 12 of these are a year, 12 months in their year. 500 such years is the lifespan of these deities. Taking all of that as a single day, if you calculated how many human years that would be, 30 such days is a month and 12 such months is a year, the lifespan of a denizen, of the hell denizens of the reviving hell, is 500 such years. So I'd calculated something like, I don't know. They had the 9 million years I'd calculated for the lifespan of the gods of the four great kings, and 90 million times 9 million, 90 million times that, 90 million times 9 million years in the lowest of the hell realms. In other words, a long time. That's so. If we think of, you might think some kind of experience that you have now is unbearable, some kind of suffering, mental or physical torment. If you compare that with the suffering of the hell realms, sometimes this is one of the reasons why a Dharma practitioner would not necessarily want his family to practice euthanasia on them, even if they're in extreme suffering, because whatever suffering we experience now for a short time may finish the karma that might otherwise throw us into the hell realms for, tens of billions of years. When the opportunity to practice Dharma is not there, any memory of the Dharma is forgotten, so that even if you were to be born as a human immediately after that, which is very unlikely, all of this hard work that you've tried to do, giving you the benefit of the doubt, this lifetime, practicing the Dharma, studying and cultivating the Dharma, all of that would be a distant memory, just a very brief imprint. So there's the suffering and the length of that suffering. Marian?
Question?
Yes.
Well, you want to finish that, and then I'll ask about something you said before.
Okay. So the reviving hell is like that. You revive after fainting away from incredible suffering. You revive from that. The black line hell is one in which you find yourself perhaps on a table, like the butcher tables of the past, where the meat was, the cut lines were decided by a hot wire. You would put it on the meat, and then the butcher would know where to cut. So your hot wires are placed across one's body, and black lines are left on your body, and your body is sliced up while you're conscious. And you imagine. Can you imagine that? Not like a guillotine, something like a guillotine, big knives coming down, chopping off your legs, chopping off that which is incredibly sensitive, Maybe your sexual organs that you might feel incredibly indignant and sensitive about. You're coming to your head, your face, cutting off your eyes, cutting off, and you're still conscious through this. Incredible suffering, more suffering and fear than in the reviving hell. You have no flexibility to move around. That lasts even longer than the reviving hell. The crushing hell. Venerable.
When you go through them all, do you know offhand what are the main causes for being born in these hell realms?
Sometimes they say particular causes, sometimes in general. Any negative karma that you've created, any of the paths of non-virtue, the 10 paths of non-virtue, that is extremely heavy, can throw you into the hell realms. Any of those that are of medium capacity could throw you into the hungry ghost realm. Any of that are of the least capacity would throw you into the animal realm. So it's not as though each and every one of these has particular causes, but you can see some general causes. This has to do with some kind of anger and intolerance and impatience. The fact that you are being retaliated upon in this way, it seems. perhaps this kind of hell is reminiscent of actions where you have taken advantage of others, like a butcher cuts up and butchers up an animal. The crushing hell, it's sometimes said that one of the causes is having taken, like sometimes you catch animals and you squeeze them, or you take the fly swatter and you, did you ever do that when you were a kid? I think when we used to live on Lake Geneva, it was our job. We had to go out and swat the flies or the mosquitoes. So here you find yourself between two mountains that have the shape of various animals. It might be flies in this case, or mosquito heads, and they're coming together, huge rocky mountains. You and others are between there, and what did they say, between a rock and a hard place? Here, you're being crushed together, and your body is like the old Flash Gordon movies, wasn't it? Remember? That the rooms, that was in some of the Star Wars too. The walls are coming, and they always get out. But here, you don't get out. You can't put up any, at the last minute, Han Solo or someone put up something to stop it. The mountains come and crush you, and you imagine your bones of your skull being crushed. You're incredibly fearful, and you're feeling the pain. You're being crushed. Even the blood and the flesh as it comes out, it's further. It's not as though you die immediately as you would with a human body. You experience greater pain. It's called a crushing hell. So sometimes it's mentioned, although it's not mentioned here explicitly, that's sometimes a result of having crushed animals in the past.
I'm finding this incredibly disturbing. I mean, this is the first time
You're
I've
welcome
heard.
to walk out.
That's true. I am. But I also have a questioning nature, so I'm not going to just fly out the door. I mean, this is the first time I've heard of this sort of level of intensity of suffering that can go on. And it's interesting because it's feeling really analogous to that sort of Catholicism idea of when you sin, you'll burn in hell. But it's kind of sounding even worse or more extreme.
Maybe.
And
Yeah, I don't know. In Dante's Inferno, it wasn't quite. There were some things, but they always seemed a little bit bizarre, But these sound much more suffering, right, and long lasting. The fact that this is not something that we've heard about before doesn't prove that it can't happen. So there are different ways to counter it in the mind. You might say, well, I never heard of that, so then it can't be. That's not a logical reason to say this doesn't exist. You might say it's not the experience of anyone I know. That might seem like a logical reason, but there are beings that have meditative experience, not just the Buddha, other beings who can recall their past lifetimes and know the past lives, the lifetimes that others are, mind streams of others that are experiencing these kinds of things now, who can perceive these things. Incredibly wise and compassionate beings who have no other agenda, that they want wealth or to, to be called the Bhagawan or something like this. These individuals, they caution us. We ask, do you have any advice to us? And they say, be careful of karma. Be careful of your actions, because what you experience after this lifetime, the enormity of future lives depends upon your actions this lifetime. There's the alternatives of incredible suffering or the possibility of pleasure, of being born as a human again and continuing the path. But that depends upon your activities. Depends on how you control the mind, how you control your body, how you control your speech. So it's something that you don't have to just accept just because the Buddha said. It's something that you have to investigate. The Buddha said again and again. But it's something that in general we don't even want to think about. Of all the subjects of the Lam Rim, whenever the suffering of the lower realms are mentioned, it's almost like, skip that section, But this is something that is the great yogis and yoginis that have some realization, they find very, very useful, because as a motivating factor, you can start to recall, in a sense, to bring back the imprints of these experiences that we have had numberless times in the past. I've mentioned in some of the other courses, one of a famous scholar now, is a Jewish scholar who teaches Buddhism at Boston College. He had come to Kopan in 1975, I think, after finishing the Peace Corps. And he got into the course that I was teaching then. And when we did meditation on the suffering of the hell realms, he came afterwards and he was crying. And he said, "Now I know the hells exist." It was some intuition that this is something he'd experienced in the past. Sometimes, what do we call it in the world? We might call it déjà vu or something like that. All over again. Just joking. So this kinds of, recalling these have many, many purposes. To bring up a certainty that such things exist, to once that certainty or some semblance of belief in that arises, to see the enormity of suffering and the obstacle to practice and the incredible discomfort, this unbearable suffering compared to what we might have to bear this lifetime. Not getting angry with something now. Getting angry with something now over something small can cause you to be born in the hell realms, where the suffering is multiplied these billions, trillions of times. So to act as a counterweight, if I can't put up with this, how could I possibly practice Dharma in the hell realms? This guy.
So here's the situation for me, and maybe a lot of people in this room, or I don't know. First of all, I do have a problem accepting the hell realms, and you've already addressed that. But even if I did, here's my problem. That is, since I don't remember from one lifetime to another, I just kind of logically go, well, when I get there, I'll somehow endure the undurable for how many billions of years, and then I'll get spit out into another lifetime, and I won't remember it all. So it's a wash.
Right.
And so not to get fearful about it. I understand the whole purpose of understanding the nature of the hell realms and that they truly do exist, and you don't want to go there. The whole function in the Lam Rim is to give you some energy to enter the path. Correct?
It's one of the factors involved. Yeah, but let's say for instance, someone who has experienced a kind of incredible suffering this lifetime, cyclically, again and again. Drug addict. I say addict. Sounds like something like a drug addict, where you go upstairs. Drug addict. Drug addict. What? That's where you hide the drugs, in the drug addict. Alcoholic, or someone who experiences incredible discomfort in episodes of that. But then later, when they recover from that, they kind of, some cases they may remember that, but one part of the mind almost tries to forget. We would say this is something they have to address, because there's no way that you can overcome that kind of addiction to cyclic existence, to rebirth, or to alcohol or drugs or whatever, without seeing the disadvantages of that, recalling the shortcomings, the way you act at that time, what you experience, the lost time, what you could have done with that time. So this is something not easy. This is not an easy meditation, but it does have a lot of benefit. So the hot hell, after the crushing hell, the hot hell, the howling hell and the extremely howling hell, something like this. You're chased into a burning house, or a house that ignites when you come into it. And you have incredible suffering. You're running around in this house. House is burning, metal walls. You can't get out. Finally, you may be able to escape, only to enter into another house, another burning house. The great howl, and in this time, you're howling inside. The people inside are under incredible suffering and screaming. But the counterpart, the next most extreme part of that, is you go into one house and you're trying to get out of it, and you go into a house within it, which is even more encased, so you can't get out at all. More howling, more extreme suffering. Then what do we have after that? We did 2 howlings. Howl. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are these hell realms, as well as all the other realms of samsara, are they truly existent?
They are not truly existent. Nothing is truly existent. But they do exist conventionally. They're like, say, for instance, is your present situation, your happiness of being a father and maybe fear of being a father, does that exist? It exists. It doesn't truly exist. Either the joy or the fears, whatever we experience in life, they don't truly exist, but they do conventionally exist as a result of our karma. Same way in the hell realms. It's not that they truly exist, but they're experienced by the minds. Grasping the true existence is totally unbearable. There's no way to meditate on emptiness and egolessness and just to see, oh, there's the appearance of suffering. So what? It's not within the mind stream of that person. Let me just try to finish a little bit more of this so we can at least have a little bit of what's the word, closure on this. So after the great howling hell, the hot hell, the hell beings, the hell guardians throw the living beings into a hot blazing iron kettle many leagues across, many miles across, and boil them, deep frying them like fish. Then they impale them through the anuses with blazing iron skewers which emerge through the crowns of their heads. Blazing flames leap forth from their mouths, eyes, noses, ears, and from all their pores. They are then placed either on their backs or face down on a blazing iron surface where they are pounded flat with hot blazing iron hammer. So this is this so-called heating hell or hot hell. So you might think these things could never happen. I think I've told you this story before. When I lived in Vermont many years ago, this is the early 70s, it was very, very cold winter, and I liked attached to hot baths. So we had this big bathtub. Did I tell you this before? Big bathtub and I filled it up. The idea was to fill it up with the hottest water and just let the temperature go down, and the steam would fill the room, so it would be really luxurious, But I had a little kitty cat, little kitten. And the kitten got into the bathroom, and I didn't know this, and I heard the cat screaming. And oh my God, and I ran in there, and it was still on the side of it had fallen in, and it was still on the side, and it was able to come out, and it walked on wobbly legs. I tried to catch it, it went, and it hid for weeks or months. The pads came off the bottom of its feet. It's got little, what do you call it, like around the eyes, not cataracts, but like something affected the eyes. The hair looked like an old cat. And can you imagine what that's like? Even that is nothing. That kind of experience that the kitty cat had, falling into that boiling hot water, scalding water, was nothing compared to what we would experience. So sometimes if you experience some things like this, you see some things like this in life, you can extrapolate what that experience would be like in the hell realms. In the great, extremely hot hells, the guardians force iron tridents into their victims' anuses and left and right prongs coming out at their shoulders, and the center prong at the crowns of their heads, causing blazing flame to shoot out from their mouths and other orifices. Their bodies are caught in a hot blazing iron press. They are thrown headfirst into a blazing iron kettle full of boiling water and boiled, floating up and down and all around until their skin, flesh and blood are destroyed. Only their skeletons remain. Thereupon the guardians fish them out, spread them on the iron surface, where their skin, flesh, and blood regenerate. They revive again and are thrown back into the kettle. The remaining torments are similar to those of the hot hells. So have you ever made clam chowder? I when I think of it, when I lived in Maine at one time, I remember how excited I was. I went and I picked clams, brought them back to where I was. Actually, I was living in Connecticut. I'd gone on vacation in Maine. And I remember, pushing them back down. It was almost like they were trying to, when you were boiling them, they're still alive. The clams are still alive. And you boil them in order to make the chowder. And same kind of suffering. I suppose these are the kinds of causes, similar causes, that might be similar, although you could experience this for many different reasons. Can you imagine what that would be like? You can see that kind of thing. If you go to the restaurants, sometimes you choose, some people choose, oh, I want that fish, that lobster, you know. And that particular one then is going to be dropped or forced in to the boiling water while it's alive. So that can happen, that does happen now in the animal realm and in our own experience, to our own perception. There are beings, I'm sure, there have been people that have been tortured. It's not beyond the ken. There have been people that have been tortured in a similar way in ancient times, medieval times, even probably at the present, in similar ways. Then we get to the Avicii hell. Here it calls it the unrelenting hell, the hell of unceasing suffering. So here one becomes, the fires come from all the different directions and one's body is consumed. One's mind is still as though one with the fire. Totally, only reason you know that there's someone there is by the screams. So these are said to be, and all of these hells, not only are they intensifying in suffering and fear, but also the length of experience is increasing. Around the hot hells, even when one experiences, one revives in these again and again, millions and millions of years, finally when one extinguishes the karma, one encounters hells in the four directions around that, directional hells. Again, I mentioned to you some of these. There's one in which you find yourself in what looks like a garden, and you are chased by dogs with huge teeth, and your skin is ripped by the razor sharp plants. You see some relatives up in the tree, and you think to find refuge with them. You start climbing the tree, and the branches that are sticking down are like spears and stick you as you're coming up. As you fall, the dogs take you away. They grab you, and okay, I thought he was laughing. I remember when I was a kid, I think I told you this story, my uncle Fred used to have, when we visited him, my brother and I were maybe 6 or 7, my mother didn't want us to go in the back room where he had his comic books. At this time there was something, you remember Mad magazine? This was, when there were comic books, there was Mad, Crazy, Cracked, I think, or there were like 4 of them, EC Comics. And they were, and Tales from the Crypt. Remember it was on TV some years ago, Tales from the Crypt. So I remember very strongly one, I think it was in Tales of the Crypt, from the Crypt. There was one sort of mean guy who took care of the blind people, got the money from the state, and he was out with the floozies at night, and he didn't give any of the money to the blind people and just beat them and didn't give them anything. So they had a plan. They built something down in the basement, a labyrinth at night, because they were blind. It didn't matter. There were no lights. They just built these very thin walls. And one night they captured him when he came home before they'd finished, and they put him in a closet. They kept his dogs. He had these like Doberman pinchers or something to protect him from them. They put them in another room. They didn't feed them. They kept on working for a couple of more days. So the dogs were ravenous. So they let him out finally, and they turned on a light so they could see. And the labyrinth was such that they had lined it with razor blades. It was just enough to walk through. You might not get cut if you just walked through very, very carefully, you know. So they told him that he could get out at the other end. And they said, but they were going to let the dogs out who hadn't eaten in many days. So then he started to try to go down, and the dogs are coming out after him. And then, you know, the witches in the Tales of the Crypt, I think there were some people that told some moral of this, and then the last thing was, and then they turned off the lights. In other words, he couldn't even see, you know, where to walk. So I thought, when I studied Buddhism, and I thought, incredible, that is exactly the same kind of horrible experience of the hell realms. Where do these kinds of imaginations come from? I think they're part of our unconscious. I think the imprints of these, memories of these are in our minds, and that sometimes people come up with these kind of things because there are things that can happen in the hell realms. So this is one of the kinds of directional hells. There's some, if you can imagine running through, thinking you're escaping from this hell experience that you've experienced for such a long period of time, find yourself in this pool of excrement and pus and blood, and as you're sinking into this, your body is being eaten by worms with big beaks that are eating your flesh, you know. You can't get out of this. Incredible, the stench, the fear, and gagging as you're going under. So these are the kinds of sufferings of the hot hells and the hells that are in the directions around it. There are experiences of the cold hells. There are various hells where one begins to sneeze and due to the cold, and blisters form, and the body begins to bifurcate and break apart due to the cold until like the hot hells, till your body is just like one with the wind and the ice. There are also occasional hells that can be experienced on the earth, and there are many stories in the Jataka tales and other sutras of individuals that you might encounter if you have the karma, that at a certain point during the day or the night they seem to have a reasonable human existence, but at another point their existence is totally ghoulish, totally hellish, and they experience that day by day, this alternation, maybe because of having kept the precepts. Let's say maybe a butcher took the precepts for 24 hours, and at night they were able to keep the precepts because they weren't slaughtering animals, but during the day they although they took the precepts, they killed during the day. So their occasional hell that they might experience as a human might be during the day to have an during the night have an incredibly blissful experience and beautiful, everything very, 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 very comfortable. But in the daytime, when they had broken the precepts, this kind of hell existence arising, maybe like the the black line hell or something, being cut up and cut again and again. This is something that we should contemplate. The adjoining hells are called here. Cold hells. Occasional hells. Okay. Contemplating the suffering of the... Here it puts the... Why does it put the suffering of the animals second and not the suffering of the hungry ghosts next? Anyone know? Generally, when we talk about the three lower realms, we might think the hell realm, the preta realm, the animal realm being highest, least suffering. But in terms of the obstacle to practicing the Dharma, the animal realm is in some ways even more an obstacle to practicing the Dharma because of a lack of clarity of mind, being obscured. Whereas the pretas sometimes, even though they're experiencing greater suffering, it's said that sometimes the pretas actually requested the Dharma teachings, could listen to it. They couldn't really actualize it very much because of the other kinds of obstacles. But let's talk about the hungry ghosts next, although the next here is the animal realm. Hungry ghosts have different kinds of general kinds of experiences, mainly as a result of avariciousness and attachment, lust, and so forth in past lives. And one of the, you may know, one of the results of attachment and covetousness is one of the karmic results of that is your wishes are not fulfilled in the future, because of striving so much egotistically to find your wishes now. So wanting to be loved, wanting to find food, wanting to find warmth, all of these kinds of things as a karmic result of your strong attachment and eagerness to pursue these things in the past, they're not found. In the hungry ghost realm, one is born with a body which is very, very itself insatiable, as though one has a huge appetite, as though a huge belly, and a very small neck. Very, very difficult to satisfy one's hunger, and very, very difficult to encounter any kind of nutrition. Sometimes because of some stories in the Jatakas, we know that the Buddha actually, in order to provide food for some pretas, asked the Sangha when they spit to bless the spittum. What is another word for spittum? Spittle. Phlegm. I won't ask any other. No, okay, no. I was just joking. The guys have all sorts of boy words for. Okay, so if it's blessed, they may be able to partake of it, because already if it's an impure subject, almost impossible for them to partake of pure substances. Sometimes they might be able to partake of the odors of some substances and when they're burned and so forth. That's why there's sometimes preta beings. Some preta beings are called smell eaters only for that reason. So there are many kinds of obstacles, not only the physical and mental suffering, never finding what you want. If you can imagine in your own lifetime, if there were periods when you wanted to get the job, you wanted to do well in the exam, you wanted to find friends, you wanted to find, whatever, money, filthy lucre, love, whatever, and you couldn't. These are the kinds of obstacles that the hungry ghosts experience over and over again. Even if they see water from the distance, and they think, oh, they see a lake from the distance. When they get closer, it begins to change, and the appearance of it looks like a huge body of garbage, pus and blood, festering mass. Even if they get close, even if they see something that looks clean and clear and edible, they may have outer obstacles, that is, what seem to be protectors around that, keeping them from getting close to it. Like, say, for instance, if you're very lonely, you might think, you might see someone in the distance, say, oh, that's the person, And as you get close, maybe they start to look much different than they looked to you from the distance. Even if they look still appealing to you, it might be that someone else comes up from the other side of them, their boyfriend or their girlfriend, or they're surrounded by other people, protected. Kind of it's a little bit like that. What was the Alanis Morissette? You know the Alanis Morissette, the singer? What was the song? Isn't it ironic, or something like that? One of the lines is that she meets the man of her life, and then his wife, or something like that. Then there are inner obstacles. Even if they find something, it doesn't, and they actually get to something that looks edible, and it's not protected by outer obstacles. They're inner obstacles. They put it in their mouth, and the poisons in their mouth begin to react. Flame comes out of their mouth. Their throat is so thin they can't get it through. Even if it comes into their stomach is cavernous. So they're never satisfied. Kind of like our experience in many cases in life, in parts of our life. The animal experience, the suffering of the animal realm, mainly being, we think of the animals that we mainly see, pets and so forth. We might not think the suffering is so bad, but most of the animals live where? Africa? New Zealand? In the ocean, right? So what is the main kind of experience of animals in the ocean? Leave Finding Nemo, aside. It's not such a pleasant experience. What's the main suffering of the animals? Yeah, being devoured by others larger than oneself. Even when born on the earth, in the human or the God realms, because remember we were talking about the elephants born in the God realms and so forth, being controlled by humans, being controlled by other animals, devoured by other animals, but being controlled by humans, used for various purposes, pulling plows, so forth, used for your flesh. Think of all of the cows, the sheep, the pigs in the world, the chickens. I read recently that His Holiness did you read about this? someone pointed it out to me, had requested McDonald's, was it McDonald's? No, Kentucky Fried Chicken, not to come to Tibet, not to come to Lhasa, for fear because of the the ease in which numbers of hundreds, thousands of chickens would be slaughtered just for that particular purpose. If you see animals the way that they're treated, in other countries, here we think of our pets as treated well, but we don't treat all animals that way. Devoured by others, fearful, also completely encompassed by the darkness of ignorance. So these are the kinds of things, if we think about our present experience, even when your mind is a little cloudy and you think you're stupid, you're not as dumb and as obscured as the animals. When you can't find, when your wishes are not fulfilled and you feel lonely and sad and so forth, nothing like the Preta experience. When you're experiencing suffering and fear, nothing like the hell experience. So these are things that are to be meditated upon, not just to be intellectually read about and said, oh, this is the Buddhist idea, this is the catechism, this is what we believe. These are things that can actually change your mind. As I mentioned, this one person who mentioned to me after meditating on this, he said, now I know. I've experienced this before. These exist. These are things that can bring up that memory. And it said, also, as a corollary of that, those of us who are trying to develop compassion for others, having understood what the suffering is like for yourself, then you can start to feel sympathy and empathy with others that are right now experiencing the suffering of the hells, the suffering, the experience of hungry ghosts and animal. You can feel compassion for them much more. So these are the causes, one of the main causes. What's the other cause of refuge? Fear of suffering, not just the suffering of the lower realms, suffering of all of samsara, suffering of not being able to, not have omniscient mind to be able to help sentient beings, different levels of fear and apprehension. What's the other cause of refuge? Faith. At least at the very beginning, at least hope that the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha can protect you. Because you don't know. How can you have faith at the beginning? But that hope, that rewa, has to transform over time into greater and greater faith. That's why our refuge changes over time. It's not as though you take refuge once and that you just do it once. Refuge you take again and again, depending upon your understanding of the suffering nature of cyclic existence, whether you start to believe in the hell realms or just the general nature of suffering, on one hand, and then your faith. First hope, I hope that, maybe that, many times we try things, new diet, financial plan or something, hoping that it may help us. It's only when we start to experience something and have analyzed it with our wisdom that we develop real faith in that, faith of conviction and so forth. So this is where hopefully we place our mind now as a preparation for Trungpa Rinpoche's course, which will begin tomorrow. So let's dedicate merits that we've created right now. At the beginning, we try to set a motivation, the virtuous motivation, very powerful motivation of bodhicitta, that can cause the whole action of listening to the Dharma, contemplating, meditating, can make it very powerful virtue, transform it into virtuous roots. So now, recognizing that we've created some virtuous karma, dedicate it, as the bodhisattvas do, these 3 times. Motivation at the beginning, concentration and continuing motivation in the middle, doing the action properly with concentration. At the end, dedicating the merits. So think, dedication is an act of aspiring or wishing, thinking, may these merits not simply ripen in my samsaric happiness alone, but may they always become the cause of my continued spiritual development from life to life. As I'm progressing along that path, may I constantly share my wisdom and good heart with others, so that eventually, by practicing the Bodhisattva's deeds, realizing emptiness, I can achieve the enlightened state of a Buddha to effortlessly and spontaneously lead all sentient beings out of their suffering into everlasting happiness, due to these, starting from these very merits. And try to seal the dedication in the emptiness of the three spheres, the emptiness of the merits, the emptiness of the goals dedicated to, and the emptiness of the active dedication itself. They all appear, are not findable, but still function.